Welcome everyone to today's webinar. The topic is how to upload a website onto RIF Storage. Today I'll be co-presenting. I'm Rinke and I'm Brendan, and Rinke will be co-presenting. For those of you who want to follow along with the slides, and I highly encourage that you do that, you can do so at the URL that's at the bottom of this page here, and it will take you to see exactly what I see on screen as well, with the added benefit that you can actually click on the links. So, right, this works best as a hands-on session. So please get your computers ready if you haven't already. You will be opening up your terminal and installing a few bits of software, and generally need a working internet connection. But if you're watching this over the internet, then I suppose that's all sorted out already. So before we delve into today's topic, let's mention that this is part of a larger series of webinars by RSK and RIF. There are over 50 past events. If you click on that link, developers.rsk.co/webinars, you'll come to a page that looks like this. This is today's session. This is one that's on Friday or Saturday, depending on your time zone. And you can also add everything to your calendar. You can also watch past videos on YouTube. We generally upload every session about a week or so after it's been completed. And there's also a huge bank of about 50 different past webinars that we've run, Spanish and Portuguese. So it's quite a lot for you to choose from over there. And this is today's webinar. Here's the details. And if you haven't yet, you can RSVP here. If you do, you will get updates about future webinars from us. So that might be something of interest to you. And also, finally, I'll link to this later on as well in the chat. This URL, it's the tutorial that we'll be loosely following along today in today's webinar. So that's just a bit of orientation. Let's get back to it. All right. So just a brief introduction to ourselves. I'm Brendan. I'm a developer advocate for IOV Labs, and I am based in Singapore. And I'm going to try out a little bit of Spanish here. Yo ya lo he estado aprendiendo durante más de 200 días en Duolingo. Estoy practicando mi español ahora mismo. But that's all the Spanish you're going to get from me today, I promise. Hope it wasn't too bad. I also have been spending my quarantine period with a couple of new hobbies. I've been farming caterpillars that turn to butterflies, and I'm also started doing some urban composting. And now we have Rinke.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Brendan. Well, before I introduce myself, can I ask you one small question? What is the reason that you put an avocado behind developer? I'm just curious.
Because avocado and advocate, they almost homophones.
An avocado as an advocate.
Yeah. Like an inside joke.
Yeah. Okay, I see. That's nice to know. So hi everybody. My name is Rinke. I'm schooled as I'm working for IOV Labs, and I'm schooled as an economist. And within IOV Labs, I also became a developer, mostly smart contract, but I also develop in Golang. At the moment, I'm mostly actually with the Swarm team, and with Swarm, I'm the product owner and a researcher. I'm living in the Netherlands, in Hilversum, which is a small city in the Netherlands. And well, the reason I get up every morning out of bed and have pleasure in my work is because I really like to be in the epicenter of innovation and to have impact with my work. And then in particular, why for RSK? Well, I think it's a really interesting company, and there's some very cool technologies which we're developing, and mostly centered around decentralization. So today we'll be talking about the Web 3.0, and I think it's really impactful because we are actually taking away potentially the power of the big platforms and creating a better and more fair and inclusive internet for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I think the first normal question which anybody has, of course, if you go to this website, is why do we need web decentralized storage at all? What is this Web 3.0? I think the best way to explain this is by a little bit of history, and for this I'll be explaining what is Web 1.0, why Web 2.0 came into existence, and what are the problems with Web 2.0, and then finally, what is Web 3.0? And of course, that's the topic of the rest of this webinar. Yeah, okay, so first Web 1.0. Web 1.0 basically came into existence with the birth of the internet. So Web 1.0, maybe some of you have been playing with it, mostly was centered around self-hosting your own websites, spinning up a server to connect to other chat instances or something like this. It was really nice in a way because you were doing a lot of the things yourself, but it was also clunky. A big problem of this Web 1.0 architecture is that you were self-hosting your website. So let's say I'm hosting a blog, and this blog post, everybody who wants to read this blog post actually needs to make a connection to my computer, my server, in order to get the contents. Well, this usually worked for small amounts of traffics, but the problem was that once this blog actually became popular and 1,000 or 10,000 or maybe even 1 million of people wanted to read my blog or download my video, basically I couldn't cope anymore with the traffic. So the website went down because of this reason. So it was quite decentralized, but it was not scalable for exactly the same reason. Well, then Web 2.0 comes into the picture. And basically what Web 2.0 promised is, okay, we take care of this hosting of your website for you. We create a platform like YouTube, or we create WordPress or Facebook, or like all those big platforms. Basically what they do, they take away from you the responsibility from hosting the content yourself. But what they ask for this in return is actually ownership of the content, ownership of knowing what are your movements on the web. So they are asking a lot actually in return. Well, and there is, of course, some very big and professional platforms. Those players are Google, Facebook, WordPress I already mentioned. And they are big exactly because of the reason that their scale allows them to offer scalable bandwidth. A big problem here is platforming, and I think a very recent example is that you see some very big YouTube stars actually getting very angry with the YouTube service because the YouTube algorithm doesn't give them their clients anymore, or even worse, their content is just banned from the YouTube website. So they put in over the years a lot of efforts into building their brand on YouTube, and now they're successful. YouTube says, okay, we don't want to support you anymore. And this is possible exactly because they are dependent on this platform. And what I would like to argue is that it's not necessarily something bad of YouTube, but the really underlying reason is the architecture of the Web 2.0, where you have, and if you can go to the next slide, Brandon, it's on the left, where you basically have one server or a couple of very big servers, and the clients, they're all talking to this server. So this architecture gives the owner of this server a lot of power on which content is hosted and which content the clients are seeing. The decentralized web works different. Basically, the big difference is that we are kind of blurring the lines between what is a server and what is a client. So who is hosting the content and who is consuming it. In the Web 3.0 architecture, we're actually again want to go back to the Web 1.0 architecture, where everybody is a consumer and a hoster of the content at the same time. So a couple of keywords which are important for the Web 3.0 is that it's censorship resistant, meaning nobody can deny any content to be online in this network. It's permissionless. Anybody can join. You don't need permission from anybody to join this network. It's immutable. So content which is online on this network cannot be amended or deleted by nobody, basically. And very importantly, it is scalable. And I hope that after this webinar, you have some better idea on how we are aiming to achieve those goals.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so RIF, the Rootstock Infrastructure Framework, obviously is believing in this Web 3.0, and therefore we contribute to some very important projects in the space. We're doing quite so many things. One, of course, very important of RSK is that we are having the RSK blockchain, which is an extension of Bitcoin. But in particular to Web 3.0, I think there are 3 projects which I want to highlight. One of those is RIF Storage. The other one is RNS. And then we having Swarm or B, which is kind of the same. And I'll go into those projects now. So RIF Storage, and you can read more about this via this URL, is basically a unified network where people will be able to connect to other decentralized storage projects around. Right now, we are having a connection already to IPFS and Swarm, but the vision is that afterwards, you can connect to the RIF Storage network, and in turn, you can connect to all the other decentralized storage projects around. RIF Storage has built-in economic incentives to make the network self-sustaining, and we do this by means of the RIF token. Then we have RNS. RNS is basically the equivalent of the DNS from the traditional web into the decentralized web. You might know that in the traditional web, any resource is identified by the location. So this is an IP location. IP, I'll type 0.0.1, it's in the chat. This is an example of an IP address, of my own IP address in this case. But in the decentralized web, it works a bit different. In the decentralized web, content is identified not by the physical address of the server which is hosting it, but is identified by the hash of the content itself. Yeah, so this hash is a long sequence of characters and numbers, and it is not. And can you please go back, Brandon? Is not comprehensible. So in order to serve this decentralized web in a way that is comparable to the old web, you need to have some sort of service which is resolving those hashes into human readable names. And for this, we're using the blockchain, and the smart contract is called RNS. Yes. All right. And then we're having Swarm. And Swarm, maybe here is a bit of a unique project for IOV Labs, because Swarm is not a project which is internal into IOV Labs. IOV Labs was not the one who made Swarm to come into existence. Swarm already exists for 5 or 6 years, but IOV Labs is a heavy contributor because we're believing in what Swarm is aiming to set out. So Swarm is really one of those projects which is building a core component of the decentralized web, which is decentralized storage. And if you have decentralized storage, you can store web pages, databases, or media streams. And Brandon, you wanted to say something about the unstoppable storage, right?
Yeah. So it's like basically if there is a way for someone to take you down, and they are, I guess, powerful enough, they can shut you down if it's in any form of centralized server. So even if the scalability is very high and whoever's hosting you is very big, they will still need to comply with the local laws and regulations. And if they receive a takedown notice, they will do that. And yeah, like, so what you want, if you really want decentralized storage, is for it to be quote unquote unstoppable, right? And that was one of the, I guess, initial missions of the Swarm project.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah. Thanks for this. And we can get this especially because it's a decentralized network. Because I think what you just said, Brandon, if having a centralized architecture, it's very easy for any government or enforcing policy or whomever to basically force this server to be shut down. But because we're having a decentralized network, there's not one place or one entity whom you can tell to stop the network, because you would need to tell thousands of individual nodes who are collaborating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of this, it's unstoppable. Cool. Okay, then the next one, we're having B. B maybe is new to some people here in this chat. What is B? B basically is the same as Swarm, but it's a greenfield re-implementation of Swarm. So Swarm is a project which has been around already for 5 or 6 years, and we've been building on it for a really long time. However, recently we realized that Swarm was built on Dev P2P as the networking layer, but we needed to have a new networking layer which was more up to date and more in line with what the rest of the Ethereum network was doing. So we needed to implement libp2p. And this gave us actually the opportunity to implement some things in a much neater way, in a nicer way. So we decided to start all the way from the ground up and release B as a production-ready implementation by the end of this year. And yeah, follow us for more announcements.
Cool.
Okay,
yeah.
Up to you.
Thank you so much, Rinke. That was very enlightening, and I think it's just dipping the toes into decentralization in general, or the decentralized web specifically. That was an excellent introduction in terms of what it is in theory, and also what are the specific projects that are what they're doing in the space. We won't be talking about all of the things that Rinke mentioned in today's webinar. We're just going to be focusing on one specific thing that he mentioned, which is Swarm. And yeah, watch this space for future webinars. We plan more. We plan for more on the topic of the decentralized web. So if you got your calendar set up with the iCal link I mentioned earlier on, or if you're signed up for our developers mailing list, you will get notified when that happens. Okay, and mentioning the part that we're focusing on today, we'll be doing a hands-on session, right? And it will be focusing on Swarm. In order to follow along, you can follow along in 2 ways. One, you can just watch Rinke and myself go through it, so it'll just be a demonstration. And we welcome you to follow along as well, follow along with the instructions. If you want to do so, you'll need the following things: a POSIX-compliant terminal, Git, and curl. And then you optionally need something called JQ and Node.js. So if you're on Windows or Linux, if you're on Mac or Linux, then you already have your standard terminal is already POSIX compliant. If you're on Windows, the standard command prompt is not, unfortunately. And we recommend that you use something called Git Bash, which you can get from gitforwindows.org. And yeah, it's just called Git Bash. The other thing is curl. That should also be available by default on Mac and Linux. If it's not, just follow that link to install it. JQ is just for pretty print purposes, really not that big of a deal if you don't have it. And for Node.js, yeah, you'll just need that for the preview site, so you don't, strictly speaking, need it. If you're on Linux or Mac, the recommended way to install it is NVM, stands for Node Version Manager. And if you're on Windows, the official Node.js installer from nodejs.org will set you up just nice. Okay, and so now we're going to start the hands-on section of today's thing. And the articles linked and the materials that we're following along today's demo are all at this link over here. And this is what it'll look like. And yeah, I guess it's time to fire up your terminal. So you can open up one of these on your computer, and we'll just get cracking. So I'm just going to make sure that my font size is okay in all of these screens, just for the purposes of those following along at home on maybe slightly small screens than the one that I have. Yeah. I'm on a 34-inch monitor. Bit of overkill. Okay, so just like to show you what this looks like. This repo that we're doing, github.com. Right. So this repo is what we'll be making use of, and this dist folder is what we really need for today's demo. So we'll just get a copy of that. What I'm going to do is modify this path slightly so that, because I already have one of those. Okay, maybe I have two of those. All right. Then I'm going to cd into that folder, right? So what I've just done is a git clone and then gone inside of it. Now if I do tree, and you can see what I've got here, I've got a dist folder. It has an index.html file, and it also has a CSS file under CSS and an SVG file under image. So it's a pretty bare bones website. Now, before we actually do anything whatsoever to do with Swarm, let's just take a look at what it would look like using a Node.js server. So earlier on, Rinke mentioned Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3. So a Node.js server would be, it's designed for client-server architecture. So what it is, it like whatever is on it, right? It just serves it on your own computer, and it is very similar to the technology that you get on, say, an AWS S3 bucket or a Netlify CDN server or GitHub Pages or something like that. So the point in doing this is to sort of demonstrate what the website should look like, and then we're going to replicate it, do the same thing all over again in Swarm.
And Brendan, if I may interrupt you here, I think indeed we're going to replicate. If you fire up your server, people you can go to this one yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's crucial to mention here that actually this server is only available for yourself, so you can see it on yourself. But if I'm going to navigate to 127.0.0.1 port 7500, I won't be able to see this website just the same way as you were seeing it, because you're self-hosting it. So it's not really available to the internet, right? It's more of a mocking. Exactly. However, what we're going to do right now with Swarm is it actually is not just replicating what you have here, but it actually will be available to the whole internet.
Yeah. Okay. So that's an excellent point, right? So what I'd like you to do is just copy paste this URL, right? 127.0.0.1:7500, right? And unless you have done exactly what I have done in the previous steps, you will not be able to see this website, right? And that's the point that Rinke is making. This is not decentralized. It's siloed on my computer because my centralized server is not serving your computer. There's no path between them. This website is not available on your server. But we're going to replicate this in Swarm. But then, because Swarm is decentralized, it will propagate through a peer-to-peer network. And if you take the Swarm URL, you'll be able to access it as well in a couple of ways. One is via your own Swarm server, and another way is through a what you call a Swarm gateway. But more on that later. Thanks for that, Rinke. Okay, so what you see here, right, is a very simple web page. It has a HTML file. It has a CSS file. An SVG file, which is served from this computer, right, on localhost. And it's also got this SVG file, which is served from Wikipedia's CDN. So don't take my word for it. We're going to do inspect element, go to networks tab, and over here we'll see the network. And I'm just going to press refresh, and you should see. Okay, cool. So I've got that external image from w3.org. Okay, wasn't Wikipedia. Sorry, I was mistaken. And you can see that I've also served up a CSS file and a circles SVG file from my own server, 127.0.0.1. So this is, like I said, the end goal. This is what we want to replicate and serve up via Swarm. We'll just leave that running in the background, right? And we will then go on to installing Swarm. So I already have Swarm available, right? on my computer. So I am just going to trash my local copy so that we can all start from a clean slate. RF, that, cool. And then the other thing I need to get rid of is RF home directory / Ethereum / swarm, right? Actually, before I delete it, I am going to just show you what's in it. So this is the current contents of all the files that I've been syncing over Swarm. So I'm just going to do. Okay, so now I have a clean slate, so to speak, and I don't have any Swarm binary available. I don't have any Swarm data directory available. Cool. Then I will install a new copy of Swarm. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to run this command, right, and download the tar.gz file. And in the meantime, I'm going to open up this downloads page, which will take you to swarm.ethereum.org/downloads, and look under the stable releases section, right? And this one of these tabs, the appropriate one for your current operating system, should be selected, and the most recent stable version should be in bold, right? So you just want to copy link location like that, and then you curl like that, and then you pipe it into the, I guess, same file name, right? But I'm not going to do that because I've just done that in the background while I was explaining what was going on. If you have Mac or Windows, you do the same thing. You can do, and then you extract it. So you just need to modify your subsequent commands by changing this particular file name to the appropriate one. Cool. So yeah, subsequent command is to untar or extract this file, which is what I'm going to do. Over here, done. And then the next thing I'm going to do is create a directory, the one that I just trashed earlier on. So now I have a Swarm bin home directory, just following the convention there. And I'm going to copy the Swarm binary from the tar file that I just extracted into this new directory that was created, right? So now if I do the which swarm command, right, you can see it now exists. And if I do swarm, what was it? Swarm version, yep. You can see that I've got 0.5.7 stable, which is what I downloaded from here. Cool. Oh, I should mention that I already had, home/swarm/bin inside my home directory. That last step will not have worked for you had it not been. So if that didn't work, then just run this command, and it should work subsequently. Now, a quick side note on this last one. So,
can you increase the font size a bit of your browser?
Sure thing. Thanks for the reminder. Is this big enough?
It's better. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Maybe even bigger. There we go. Much bigger. Okay. So this command here will differ depending on your configuration. So if you're using Linux with Bash, this will work. If you're using Mac, sorry, this didn't copy. If you're using Mac on an older version of Mac, you want .profile. Sorry, my bad. Typing is not my strong suit, apparently. So that's what it'll be on a version of Mac, I believe, that is older than OS X Catalina. And on newer versions of Mac Catalina and above, I believe by default your ZSH RC. So you'll have to do that. And after you do that, you should restart your terminal, meaning you close your terminal window and open a new one to make sure that your environment variables have been reloaded. Okay, moving on. At that point in time, if you do swarm version, you should now get this. Okay, cool.
Question from Perry. He says, when I do swarm version, I get error and unable to open input data file version. There's an error which I have not seen yet.
Okay, that's interesting. It sounds like you may have a different binary called swarm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when I do swarm, I get CPU. Okay, and what happens if you do which swarm? exactly.
Yeah, if you do which swarm.
Yeah. An alternative, what you can do, Perry, is not just doing swarm, but actually directly pointing to the binary user bin swarm. Yeah.
Yeah, so
instead of this,
have a different swarm installed.
Yeah. So you do, if you want, you can remove user /bin /swarm. I think this will solve it.
Yeah, another alternative. I'm assuming you're on Linux and or Bash. You'll want to do. Let's see if I can ruffle up a command right away. Hold on. So this will make swarm, give swarm a higher priority, and then tilde/bash_rt. You're on Linux with Bash, I'm assuming. Okay, so this command here, like that will make sure that your swarm binary path is has got a higher precedence than anything else on your path, right? So you're putting it in front instead of behind. And if that works for you, then that means that your original thing, that binary that will swarm, will no longer be used until you remove this path. So it's up to you. Yeah, or you can do the slightly more cavalier method, which Rinke has proposed, which is just to delete the older version of swarm.
There's only one real swarm, so you can delete
the one true swarm. Okay, if you are unable to figure it out, we will help you. The email address to get in touch with us is developers@iovlabs.org. We'll be happy. Yes, those messages are perfect. That means you've actually started swarm. Cool. All right. Where I'm sort of figuring out where we left off. Okay, cool. So now we've started swarm. We are about to start swarm. Okay, so like that, and you'll see a message that looks like this. So you'll have a user account or an address, if you will, and you need to create a password. Just create any password you like. Doesn't really matter what it is. It'll be used to generate a private key to, correspond with that account. If you're familiar with private key, public key pairs and accounts on Ethereum, RSK, or other crypto networks, that will, it's a pretty similar concept. Now, the reason why this is necessary is because if you're in a browser, right, like this, you don't need an ID or anything like that in order to interact with the website. But that's because you're a client and you don't really have any, rights and or responsibilities. Whereas in Swarm, you are in a peer-to-peer network and you're a node participating in that peer-to-peer network, which analogy-wise, you can think of it as you are both a client and a server, which is why Rinke said earlier on that the lines between what is a client and what is a server are blurred. So this is why it's important to uniquely identify each node in a, cryptographically verifiable way. And that's what your account is for. So then you see a bunch of output. You can ignore most of it. We don't really care. Just leave it running in the background. Now, what we want to do next is we want to visit the Swarm node that we've just started. It actually runs a HTTP server. And if you go here, you'll be able to enter any Swarm hash you want here to visit it or download the file, or you can press upload and you can upload a file. But we're not going to be using the web UI here today. That's not what this demo is about. You can explore that in your own time. Instead, what we'll be doing is uploading a website to Swarm. So let's jump into a new terminal, right? And let's see. What was the path we were at? Make sure we get the same one. All right, so now let's just See that? Okay, so now this folder is something that we want to upload to Swarm. And this command here, which I'm just going to paste, is the command needed to upload that entire folder to Swarm. Recursive means it's not just a single file. Manifest is true is implied by recursive. I'm just being explicit. We'll see what the manifest is later. And this default path thing is kind of saying that if I visit this hash and I don't specify what file path is underneath it, I will default to this file instead of saying, hey, I couldn't find anything. So that makes it browsable on using a standard browser. Okay, cool. And what did we get? We got an output, and this output is a 64-character string, and that is the hash of this particular upload. Now, here's the interesting bit, right? I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it inside the browser, right? But first, I'm going to type /bzz:/ followed by the hash, and there we go. So we've actually got the exact same website that we had previously served on the right, and we working because the image isn't being clipped, and both the external image and the localhost image are being served. But this is no longer localhost. This is actually a peer-to-peer host, if you want to think about it that way. Cool. It's just being served through localhost. Now, I'm just going to do a slightly geeky thing, and then I'm going to punt control over back to Rinke so that you can see it happening on a different computer as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this hash that we just got, and we are going to do this, right? So instead of BZZ, I'm going to do BZZ raw, right? And what that does is it gives me a manifest file. Now, this might look like gibberish to you, but it's actually JSON. If you happen to have the JQ command installed, and I pipe it through it, it becomes a lot more readable. And you can see here, you might recognize, oh, hey, I know that file exists within my directory. And then you'll see here, this is the index.html. There's no path. It's the default file. And then this I is a bit complex to explain, and I'm not going to go into the detail, but that's more thoroughly explained inside of this tutorial. But we'll leave that for you to explore in your own time, in the interest of getting this webinar wrapped up in time. And for now, I'll go over to hand it over to Rinke, and hold on a bit. Okay, I can talk for a bit longer. So this is the local host.
Brandon. I was typing to Perry. I didn't mean that you need to hold on.
Okay, sorry. Okay,
yeah.
So I will paste my localhost URL, right? And you should be able to access that if you're running a Swarm node. If not, just hold tight and Rinke will show you an alternative. And this is the 64-character hash that corresponds to that same URL. Okay, so I'm gonna stop screen share. How do I do that? Let me just figure this out. Okay, Rinke, it's all yours.
Cool. Well, thanks, Brandon. And indeed, I will right now copy this hash, and I'll demonstrate that when Brandon was saying that he is actually serving it to the internet, he's actually doing this. So I also have started a Swarm node on my background, so I can go here, and the Swarm node is running here. So you see, I'll also get like many error messages. I'll go into what those mean later. But first, I want to download the website from Brandon. So as you see, this is a hash. This hash identifies the content of this actual website. It's the hash of the content. And navigate to it. You'll be able to see that I can download this website, and actually the experience is very similar to what happens in a normal web. But I want to stop maybe for a really short while to kind of realize what has actually been happening here in the background. So the first thing is that we are starting a Swarm node. If you start a Swarm node and you can't really see it right now because there's too many error messages, But the first thing that happens is that I'm going to make connection to other nodes who are in the network. So there's one boot node which I am aware of, and this boot node is going to tell me, hey, please connect to Brandon, connect to Perry, connect to Solange. And I'm actually, from all those nodes who are at the moment online in the network, I'm connecting to a subset from those nodes. And this subset is very carefully chosen for me to be able to actually be able to locate all the resources which are in the network. So we said that this is a decentralized website, but what does it actually mean? Well, it actually means that literally this website is not hosted on one place, but we actually cut it up into many tiny pieces, and those tiny pieces, they are spread around in a network based on a certain algorithm, and I think it goes too deep right now what this actually is, but I think it suffices to say that those chunks of 4,000 bytes each are all served equally by all the nodes in the network. Yeah, so what happens if I'm navigating to this website, and maybe if we're quick enough, you can see it. I'm just reloading it now. And do you see it? No, you can't see it here. But what happens in the background is that I am actually requesting all those chunks from all the nodes in the network, and I'm piecing them together into, well, what I can see right now as a normal website. Yeah. So that's happening in the background, and I think it's really interesting that it happens so quickly, but it's important to realize that actually there's a lot of magic, beautiful magic, I think, happening in the background, makes it completely decentralized. Okay, so Brandon promised that I'll be able to show one other way of actually downloading this URL. And that is for those people who are not running, who are maybe on mobile, or who are not running a Swarm node by themselves for whatever reason. And notice what's happening here on the browser, on the URL. I'm now on the website swarmgateways.net, and this is a normal Web 2.0 server. But this Web 2.0 is a gateway, and it's exactly what the name says. It's an entry into the decentralized web via a centralized server. Yeah, so I can just as I was using it in my own gateway here, this is a self-hosted gateway. I can go via the gateway which is hosted by the Swarm Foundation, and I can browse to exactly the same website. Yeah.
Yeah, Rinke, can you copy that URL, the Swarm Gateways URL, into the chat?
Yeah, I'll do it here. All right. Yeah, I see another error. Swarm command not found. Yeah, also this means that that your path is probably not set correctly. Yeah. All right. I will just continue. Maybe Brandon, you can type and try to help Solange.
Okay.
All right.
So it looks like at least one of you has got it working.
Okay.
Excellent.
I am going to download this website, and I'll show you yet another way. So if I can download a directory, I can also do this in the command line. For this, I use the command. First, I'm going to make a folder. My websites. Yeah, you see it's here. It's inside this same thing. Do cd into my websites, and right now I can download this actually whole folder by doing swarm down recursive, and then here we paste the hash which we got from Brandon, which was this one here, and then folder, because I'm already in the folder, you see it here, I just say dot. And right now, if I do 3, you actually see that I just downloaded the whole folder. So exactly the same happened. I'm not showing it in the browser. I'm just downloading it to my own folder. What I can do right now, I can actually open it in my code editor, and I can make a slide edit. So let's go again to the image.html, and Brandon called it swarm demo. Well, this is my swarm demo, so I just call it Rinke swarm demo, and here again, swarm Rinke's demo. I like to put my name here. and this I just and this deleting into our carefully written text by some gibberish. This is good, Brandon. What's my website? I can do whatever I want. Okay, so I saved it, and right now I can actually re-upload this. For this, I'm using this command, exactly the same as what Brandon did before. So form, default paths, and now I need to point to the index HTML. So this is index.
/index HTML, yeah. Oh, that should work.
/ index HTML, and then if it's true, recursive up folder, and again this is
stop.
Free. All right, so now I'm getting a hash, and I'm posting it here. Brandon, maybe you can see.
Excellent.
If you can view this. Oh, wait, I should do it like this.
Yep, I've got the hash. Yeah. Okay. I'm ready to.
Over to you.
Begin. Cool. All right. Now we're back. So, so what Rinke has just done is he's taken this original set of files, he downloaded it from Swarm onto disk, not in his browser, and he has also modified it and then re-uploaded it. Now you'll notice that there's something different, right? So his hash is different from mine. So this was my hash. It started with 5F8C, right? And this is Rinke's hash. It starts off with 0347, right? And you can see that it serves up a manifest file as well with the same pattern, but the hashes within it are different, right? So you can see that's the index.html file. It starts with AC1. This one is different because we know that he changed the index.html file. So let's take a look at that, right? So I'm going to download Rinke's site here. I'm going to view Rinke's site. There you go, Swarm Rinke's demo, right? And I've also got his gibberish. Yes, so Perry, I see your question. Whenever you update the site, the hash will change. So long as the contents of anything inside the site changes, there will be a hash change.
If you have been following along and trying to upload exactly the same website as that Brandon has been uploading, like the demo website, you actually notice that you have exactly the same hash.
Yeah, exactly, precisely. So that brings us to an important point about duplication. That's an excellent question. It's actually a good segue to the next thing that I was going to mention, right? You'll notice that if I did the manifest download for my original upload, you notice that the index.html file or the default path, like I mentioned earlier on, the hash is different. But what you'll notice is that styles.css, which Rinke did not modify, starts with 6354, and it also starts with 6354. You know, it's the same hash, right? And the reason for that is because Swarm doesn't duplicate things that it does not need to duplicate. It just says, hey, these are the same files. They will result in the same chunks. So let's not waste that effort in terms of computation and storage space.
By the way, it's completely opposite to how the normal web does it, because in a normal web, if you want to have a duplicate of any website, you will need to store the whole website on your own server.
Yeah.
And
precisely.
If you allow me, Brandon, I also would like to make a small bridge here into like the beginning where we said that that such infrastructures are good against like the big platforms. And if you think about what this actually means that we've been just doing, so imagine that you are hosting your own decentralized YouTube on this platform, and now the owner of this this website, or owner, I mean, it's loosely defined, but the original uploader, he makes an update. So let's say he puts I don't know, the search bar not anymore on the top, but he puts it on the side. What can happen right now is anybody who just doesn't like this change can revert it back and can just put the search bar maybe on the left if he prefers this. So in Swarm, everything is available to everybody, which means that that you're not tied to the platform who is the content owner, but the content is there and it's available for everybody to work with and to modify it. Yeah, that's what I wanted to tell. Oh, Brandon, I think I muted you. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'm back.
Yeah, cool.
Okay. Yeah, let's continue. So I am going to start my screen share again. All right, we're back. Okay, so I would encourage all of you who are following along to share your BZZ URLs or your Swarm hashes in the chat room if you have them, and maybe we can take a look at them at the end of the thing. It'd be good to see if we have some success stories from today's. Someone's actually able to create their own website on Swarm. All right, but for now, that
I don't see your screen, Brandon. I don't know if it's me, but I don't see your screen.
Sorry, I will attempt that again.
Yeah. Let's see, it's black for me. Well, yeah, now it comes. Yeah, excellent. We see you.
Okay. All right. So yeah, like I was saying, share your BZZ URLs or your Swarm hashes in the chat, and we'll be happy to take a look at them. That would be excellent. If not, find us in Gitter or send us an email at developers@iovlabs.org, and we'll be happy to continue the conversation. Yeah, so that brings us to the end of the demo section of tonight's webinar, or this morning's webinar, depending on where you are. If you have any more questions, please let us know in the chat or one of the channels I just mentioned. And would like to, sort of, before we wrap up, just quickly mention that Swarm is at the cutting edge of the decentralized web. However, the deep web as a whole is still very much in its infancy, still early stages. So you've really got to watch the space. Things can change really fast. And in fact, Rinke is about to tell you just how much is going to change in just the next 1 to 2 months.
Coming up, there's quite a lot of things which the RIF Storage team right now is working on, and I only limited the announcement to what's upcoming in the upcoming 2 months. So by the end of this month, 2 things will be published. The first thing is RIF Publish, and RIF Publish is actually a service. It's like a WordPress-like tool, which actually is allowing anybody to publish news articles on the decentralized web and benefit from all the benefits which decentralized web has. The difference here is that it's really focused on the users, so you won't need to have any knowledge of the webinar which we've just been hosting. It will make it very seamless and easy to publish your articles on the decentralized web. Then the second thing is the alpha release of the B client, which I talked about before. I think this is really exciting because the alpha release basically has all the ingredients that will allow people to connect to the Swarm network and upload and download chunks and files in the end as well. Then global pinning is something which we didn't talk about, but global pinning is basically the ingredient which allows persistence on the decentralized web by yourself. And then also, you might want to make use of the global pinning services of other nodes. And for this, we have the RIF Storage services, which basically adds the incentivization to this global pinning. Yeah, and then the next slide. Cool, and we also have some resources here. I won't go over everything, but if you have the slides yourself, I highly encourage to follow all the resources. Here are some blogs which were written by the RIF Storage team for the last months. And then if you go to the next slides, we're having some more resources among those, the developer documentation and the repositories of Swarm, which we've been using right now, and B, which will be useful very soon after the alpha release.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much, Rinke. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's demo and you've got a bigger picture understanding of what Swarm is, and what RIF Storage is, and what RIF is, and all the projects that come together to make the decentralized web happen. So what we've covered today is actually, just a small part of the bigger picture. And there's much more to learn about how to use and publish on the decentralized web. And the topics that you see on the screen right now, we've got it planned out in the next next few months. So please come to our subsequent sessions on these topics, and we'll be sure to let you know. Thank you very much to everyone who's attended. Please be sure to check out developers.rsk.co/webinars for more sessions on RSK and RIF. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Well, really a pleasure to be here.
All right, bye.